Okay, page 23, picking up from where we left off. So just brief recap. We were introduced to all of Samuel's family and his best friend Francisco. It seems to be that there are some family secrets that people are hiding. And now his friend, who was looking forward to this new job he had gotten, he goes to check on him and he hadn't shown up, so now he's kind of worried about him. And the adventure continues. Now, I included some things in here just out of respect for history, I guess. I don't know. I just wanted to keep things accurate to the time. And so there will be some scenes that kind of include or describe things of that time period just for the sake of, I wouldn't say just for the sake of showing that time period, but just because I felt like it matters to really get a feel for what the characters are going through and what's influenced their perspective and so on. So anyway, that was just a little bit of that. So back to where we left off. They walked for several blocks before she finally stopped them. This one, she exclaimed. The window to the shop displayed several dresses on mannequins. Ugh, groaned Emery. She has become such a girl. Sounds like I should come home so I can put a stop to that, teased Samuel. Ignoring them, she led the way into the shop. What can I help you with? Asked a peppered-haired man behind the counter, looking over his spectacles. Behind him, a boy about Emery's age had been stacking shelves until he saw Baven and had to stop to stare. I'm just looking for a dress, and the ones in the window caught my eye, explained Baven. Would you like me to take one down for you? Offered the clerk. Yes, thank you. She moved in front of a full-length mirror when he handed her the dresses. She turned to her brothers and asked, Which one do you think I should get? The one you like, stated Emery, smiling mischievously. Samuel chuckled as she stuck her tongue out at Emery playfully. Noting that the clerk's son was still gawking at her, he asked, Which one do you think she should get? Baven turned to see who he was talking to, and only now seemed to notice him. His cheeks went rosy, but he answered anyway, The green one. It brings out her eyes. He quickly turned away and went back to work. She turned back to the mirror and held the green dress up to herself. I think I'll take it, she announced. Thank you, she told the boy. It will need to be altered. It's a bit too large, she informed the clerk. My wife does that. Give me just one moment, and I'll go get her. Samuel noticed that the boy was again paying more attention to Baven than what he was doing. On the ground in front of him sat an unopened box of supplies. He nudged Emery, drawing his attention to the boy as he carried an armful of material in that direction, still too busy watching Baven to notice. They watched as the boy tripped over it, falling forward, the contents of his arms flying everywhere. Are you all right? Asked Baven, concerned. Emery made a sort of snort, after which he and Samuel could no longer hold it in. They ran out the door, laughing until their cheeks and sides hurt. Emery was reenacting it when someone tapped Samuel on the shoulder. He was still smiling when he turned to face him. He did not recognize the man. He was slightly taller than most, lean with a slight build, and his light brown, wavy hair hung loose to his shoulders. Samuel Callow? Yes, responded Samuel, wary. The man let out a small chuckle. I knew it had to be you. Samuel eyed him suspiciously, still uneasy from his last encounter with a stranger. Sorry, I don't recognize you, Samuel apologized. Oh, of course not. We've never met. He stated. I sailed with your grandfather for a short time. You laughed just like him. He spoke about you a lot. My name is Miguel, by the way. Samuel smiled, thinking of his grandfather. What has he been up to lately? Asked Miguel. He's gone, answered Emery. Gone? Miguel looked confused. His ship disappeared several years ago. No one has seen him since, explained Samuel. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. He was one of the best captains I have ever had the pleasure of serving under, stated Miguel. Without a doubt, agreed Samuel. How about you? Asked Miguel. How about me what? Asked Samuel, puzzled. Do you like to sail? Samuel could picture the unhindered view of the open ocean and the feel of the air moving around him. You don't have to say anything. I can see it on your face, chuckled Miguel. If you're interested, my captain is looking to take on a few new crew members this voyage. Would you like to come? Who's your captain? Asked Emery, curious. Captain de Souza. He's one of the best captains there is, right up there with your grandfather. So what do you say? Forget the stresses of land life for a time and go on an adventure?" urged Miguel. "No, thank you. I have too many obligations to even consider it." "I'll go," piped up Emery. "That's the enthusiasm we look for," smiled Miguel. "This land will always be here when you return. Think of it as one last fling before you're hit with all the troubles waiting for you in a few years." "If I were to sail with anyone, it would be my father," Samuel pointed out. "Oh, that's right. Captain David Kahlo." "Yeah, he's one of Captain de Souza's biggest rivals, if you hadn't noticed," Samuel pointed out. "I guess you're right," he acknowledged, smiling as though the thought amused him. "Well, if you ever want someone to talk to you about your grandfather, I'd love to chat. You know where to find me, so stop by any time," Miguel told him. He walked away as the door to the shop opened. "I'll see you soon," Maven called behind her as she left the shop. She now looked at her brothers with her hand on her hips, then shook her head. "I stayed with you all day, even when I was bored." She pursed her lips, annoyed. "I can't believe you can't stay with me for one shop." She held up one finger in front of her for emphasis. "Didn't you see what happened?" Emery laughed again. "Yeah, we didn't want to laugh in his face," added Samuel, chuckling. "So what? He tripped. It happens." She twisted her jaw just like their father did when annoyed. "You've seen a lot of men trip, haven't you? So it probably seems normal," teased Samuel. "What is that supposed to mean?" she said, the pitch in her voice rising. Samuel and Emery laughed. "Fine," she huffed, while retaining a gleam of amusement in her eyes. In the distance, Samuel caught a glimpse of Mariela. They had been friends for almost as long as he and Francisco had been. She was the only one who knew where he went to get away when he was stressed, and often met up with him there. She was more than beautiful. She had a way of making him feel like he was the only person she could see. He was about to go and say hi, until another young gentleman about their age approached, and she began talking and laughing with him, the same way she did with Samuel. He could feel his cheeks redden. He was not sure if it was jealousy or embarrassment that caused him to feel this way. Mariela reached out and touched the boy's arm as she laughed, even throwing her head back as she did it. "What is it?" asked Maven, trying to see what he was staring at so intently. Emery was now trying to see too. "Nothing," answered Samuel, sounding a bit curt without meaning to. "I'm just worried about Francisco." Maven nodded her head understandingly. She took him and Emery by the arm and made their way back to the carriage. The ride to Francisco's seemed to drag on as many scenarios played out in Samuel's head, explaining why Francisco hadn't been at Eli's today. Maven and Emery waited in the carriage as Samuel knocked on the estate of Sebastian Torres, where Francisco was employed. Lupe, one of their servants, answered the door. "Samuel, come in. I'll get Sebastian for you," he greeted him warmly. "That's all right. I'm only here to check on Francisco. Is he all right?" Lupe looked puzzled. "I wouldn't know. I haven't seen him since yesterday, sometime in the late afternoon." "Oh," responded Samuel, confused. "Sorry," apologized Lupe. "I wish I could be of more assistance. If I see him, I'll let him know you were looking for him." "Thank you, Lupe." He was walking back to the carriage when he heard the shrill, familiar voice of Sylvia, Sebastian's second daughter. Cringing, he turned to greet her politely. She waved her bony hand high in the air. He gave her a small wave back. Her parents made it a point to mention their desire to see them wed as often as opportunity would permit. The idea of having to hear that voice daily made him shudder. Her voice was not the only reason he would never marry her. Everyone, including himself, knew the only reason they wanted them to marry was for his money. She and her older sister, Gloria, were whispering and giggling to each other as they approached him, their maid, Lisa, following close behind. "This is a nice surprise," Sylvia smiled broadly. "I didn't know you'd be stopping by." "Sorry, I didn't mean to drop in on you unexpectedly," Samuel apologized. "That's all right. Papa will be happy to see you. He's in his study right now, catching up on some paperwork." I would hate to interrupt, and truthfully, I just came to check on Francisco." "Francisco?" repeated Gloria. "Yes, he stopped by my house last night, excited about having gotten an apprenticeship with Eli, the clockmaker. He was supposed to start today, but he never showed up," Samuel told them. "Oh," Sylvia responded, surprised. "I didn't even know he had been planning to leave our services." "We haven't seen him since yesterday," Gloria informed him. Lisa, have you seen Francisco? She asked, turning to their maid. No, Lisa answered, her voice softened with concern. And he is not in the house. If you come with us, we can check the stable. Perhaps he is doing his chores in there, suggested Sylvia. She suddenly paused when she saw Baven watching from the window of the carriage. Gloria was already grabbing her by the arm and leading her toward the stables before she could ask who she was. I'd better tell my company what I'm doing before disappearing on them, stated Samuel. That's all right. Lisa will do it, Gloria offered. Lisa, please let Samuel's company know where he's going. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Samuel called after her. The stables were located a distance from the estate, as Mrs. Torres couldn't stand even catching the faintest scent of them. Francisco took care of the horses and the stables and could often be found there. He was even known to sleep there from time to time, so finding him there would not have surprised them. The stalls were as one would have hoped to find them, neat and clean. The horses were resting or chewing on hay. The creaking of the last stall door, swinging slightly with the breeze, was the only noise, aside from the horses. Francisco? Samuel called. Francisco, are you in here? They checked each stall until they came to the last. His outstretched legs were the first thing they saw. Samuel sighed. He had put his neck out there for him to get him that job, and he ditched it to nap in a straw-filled stable? He pushed the door to the stable wide open, revealing a ghastly sight that would haunt his dreams for a long time. Sylvia and Gloria let out ear-piercing screams before running out, horrified. Samuel dropped to his knees, breathless, unable to stand the sight. He removed his own coat and put it over what was once Francisco's head. In Francisco's scarred hand, he held a sloppily written note addressed to Samuel. Although it had not been sealed, it had the wax imprint of a symbol of a snake wrapped around the world. In his other hand was the gun that must have taken his life. Samuel shoved the note in his pocket when he heard people coming, wanting to keep Francisco's last words private until he knew what they were. It wasn't long before the stables were flooded with Sebastian's servants. Sebastian came to his side, then led him away from the now crowded stable. Are you all right? Asked Sebastian, as they stood outside the stables. I told your driver to take your guests home. There will have to be an investigation, and they're going to want to question you. Understand? He asked, putting his hand on both of Samuel's shoulders to make sure that he was listening. The feeling of trying to listen to people while being underwater was the only way he could describe this moment. Sebastian led him to his office, away from the rest of the household, and had him sit down to wait. He went to your house last night, didn't he? He asked. Samuel slowly nodded. Why? Sebastian asked, confused. He was excited about the apprenticeship he had managed to get with Eli. He wanted to tell me about it. Samuel could not see past the memory of Francisco's excited face or hear much beyond the sound of his voice, full of life and expectation. I didn't even know he was planning to leave my estate. And who is Eli? Sebastian looked confused. He shook his head. That's embarrassing, isn't it? Not knowing what is going on in your estate? You understand, I'm sure. He took a deep breath as he gathered his thoughts. Everyone is going to be gossiping about this for a long time, he commented regrettably. He went on about what people would think and what they were going to tell them. Samuel felt himself only catching about half of what Sebastian was saying. He tapped his leg anxiously before remembering the note he had placed in his pocket. He wanted to pull it out and read it. However, he feared that it contained something Francisco would want only him to see. To his relief, Sebastian finally stopped rambling. I need to check on my girls again. If you need anything, let me know. Remember, you're like family, Sebastian assured him. He left the room, closing the door behind himself, giving Samuel the chance to read the note. Pulling it from his pocket, he opened it. To his disappointment, there was no message, just his name, followed by gibberish, clearly written in Francisco's handwriting. No one in the house claimed to have seen him, yet he had to have gotten the paper and ink from somewhere. If he hadn't gone into the house for it, where did he get it? Samuel tried to figure this out, but he was still struggling to process what had happened to Francisco. He was still lost in thought when the door opened. He recognized Octavio the moment he walked in. His shaved head and pressed clothes were just the surface of his need for perfection, order, and law. He was thought of by most as being cold and void of emotion, although he once heard his grandfather say, that he was just misunderstood. Samuel had no opinion on the matter, as this was only one of the few interactions he'd had with him. His questions were clear and direct, yet Samuel found himself asking him to repeat them. Octavio finally thanked him for his time and was rising to his feet as the door flew open, narrowly missing him. "What is going on in here?" demanded David, infuriated. "Captain, have a seat." Octavio's voice remained impassive despite David's rage. Seeing that David had no intention of listening, he continued, "He was one of the witnesses who found the body. I must question everyone. I've already talked to Gloria and Sylvia, who were with him. This isn't anything other than a typical investigation," Octavio assured him. "Papa, he's right," Samuel assured him. David still eyed Octavio suspiciously, but calmed down. "Let's go," he finally ordered, still shaken. Samuel followed him to the carriage. "If Octavio is involved, it means it didn't look like a suicide," David explained once they were inside. Samuel wasn't sure if he could really absorb the implications, but he knew it bothered him. "Are you all right?" asked David. When Samuel shook his head no, David put his arm around him and pulled him tight to him. Although he appreciated the gesture, he wanted nothing more than to just be left alone. He felt like the world around him was trying to crush him, and all he wanted was to escape. Samuel was filled with anxiety watching as they drew closer to his grandmother's estate. And we will leave it there for now because I read a lot. So, okay. Anyway, we'll find out what happened to Francisco later on. We're ending on page 32. So that was pages 23 through 32. Anyway.